In this video, we're going to take a look at how to set up Yoast in 2018. Let's jump right in. All right, guys, let's talk about Yoast. It's a little bit like toast, and you're going to love it. Just like toast, actually. Who doesn't like toast? So Yoast has been an SEO staple of the WordPress community for years and years and years, and they keep on iterating and changing and removing and adding stuff. So I wanted to go over Yoast for 2018 so you know exactly what needs to be set up for your blog if you've done it before or if you've got the new version and you don't know where anything is. I'm going to quickly go through everything, tell you what's most important, and let's jump right in. Okay, if you install Yoast, this is what you see. But for those of you who don't know how to install Yoast, let's just quickly see how you would do that. You go to plugins and you can do add new, or you can click add new at the top here, get you to the same place. And then basically you can type in Yoast on the top here, which is the same as toast with a Y on the front. And you install this bad boy here, top left, Yoast SEO, and you activate it. So you have to install and activate. Okay, short version. If that doesn't help you, jump on the web. There's 50,000 or a million tutorials on how to install plugins on WordPress. So then you get a menu on the bottom left. Look down on the bottom left, you'll see a Y logo and then an SEO. And that brings you to the Yoast menus and opens them up on the left-hand side. And you'll jump to the main page here. You can go through a configuration wizard. Personally, I don't bother because I like to do everything by hand, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that too. But you can click on that here in the top section here, check Yoast configuration. There's a bunch of notifications. You can pretty much kill most of these. Have a bit of a read out of interest's sake, but I'm not going to go through them. So the first thing we want to do is have a look at search appearance. This is where all the good stuff is. So we're on the left-hand side in the second menu, search appearance here. Yoast has moved most of the hiding and showing of content, the non-indexing as it's called, and the taxonomy and all that stuff into this section. So if you're trying to figure out where all the hide and show post stuff has gone, it's in here. So they've consolidated most of the useful settings into this search appearance section here. The first thing you can do is decide on what separator you use, because when you create titles for your content, the titles are the things that appear on Google in blue. On Google, you often have the name of the post dash dot slash the name of the website. And if you want to do that, and it's quite handy to have your brand name appearing all the time, then you want to have a separator automatically set between those. Now, I typically go for the smallest one possible, a dash, or even better is a dot. Just gives a bit of separation, but takes the least amount of space, because that space is really, really useful for having a long heading and taking as much of that space with a useful SEO and attractive heading as possible. So use the dot, go for the dot. And then you can also choose here whether your website is for a company or a personal brand. And that then takes some information and gives it to Google for what's called the knowledge graph, which is when people do searches on you or your business, what appears on the right-hand side. Just go into Google, type in Apple, and you'll see a panel on the right-hand side for the company Apple and the CEO and their address and all this stuff. Some of that's taken from here, in WordPress anyway. So you can select that here. Not a big deal, but you can set that up. So then we go to content types, and this is where you can hide and show stuff. Why would you want to do that? Well, WordPress sometimes creates a bunch of useless junk, and depending on your theme and the plugins you're using, there can be more or less useless junk than in other cases. So I'm using a theme that I don't know if it has too much. I'm new to this theme, so let's have a look. You've got posts, pages, libraries. Yeah, some of this stuff is junk. So let's go through it. Okay, posts is your blog posts. Do you want them in search results? Yes or no? Yes, you do. You can change the default title that appears in Yoast, so the box below your pages and posts where you edit your title and meta description. This is the default that will appear in there, which is what appears on Google. If you want to change the default, you can play around with it here. Yoast has got some helpful hints on their website. You can jump over there and have a look at what all of these crazy percentage stuff is there. But generally, I would leave this as is. It usually works really well. It's just name of the page or post, the separator that you chose in the other tab, and then the site name. That's all this is saying here. So normally you don't need to change this. Meta description, you can put in a default meta description. I wouldn't recommend it. You should always add a meta description to every page or post that you create, and you do that on the page or post. Yoast also gives you that panel, which I'll show you at the very end. Whether or not you show a date in Google results in the snippet preview, so what's in Google. Posts you can. Sometimes helpful, sometimes not. As your content gets more stale over the years and isn't as up to date, it can be more of a hindrance. I typically don't show it. You can make a decision here. Do you want the Yoast box to appear? Is the next thing Yoast SEO meta box? I would leave that on for every single piece of content where you're wanting to add that. So it's pages and posts, any kind of special custom pages and posts you have, events, things like that. Depends on the theme. Again, pages, it's the same thing. Yes, you want them to appear in search results. We're going to leave the default title template alone. We're not going to add a meta description template. There's no dates in pages, so that's irrelevant. We want the Yoast box to appear in pages. My library, this is from a plugin. Again, you get a lot of this kind of garbage from plugins and sometimes from themes, like Divi has some. And if you're not using the stuff, or if you're using it but it's kind of injected into a page like this stuff is, then you don't want it appearing in search. So in general, if you don't recognize and it doesn't make any sense, turn it off. So that's going off. Header and footer templates, again, is an Elementor thing, so we're turning that off. Date snippets, I don't want those appearing. So that's good. Then we'll go in and save that, but I'm not setting this website up. So I'm not going to save that. Let's go to media. So media is your uploads. So your PDFs, your images, things like that. So the problem you have in WordPress is that often WordPress creates pages for your images, which is really stupid. So on the media here, you've got a really useful redirect on the top here, which is redirecting the page image URLs to the attachment itself, which is really useful. And that takes care of everything. So you can go in and play around with these, or just remove them and redirect them to the page themselves. As far as I know, and I'm not the absolute guru expert on this, but I do a lot of SEO, is your images are picked up from the places they're used and the alt text and captions and titles that you apply to them when you add them to pages and posts. So you don't need to necessarily index them separately. So it's okay to do this. If you're a photographer and you have lots of galleries and stuff, you may want to consider having a separate sitemap for your images or videos or things like that. I'm not going to get into that in this particular post, but it's probably not really relevant to this section anyway. So that's media. Generally, you can turn that off and click yes, which is turning it all off. Categories and tags, we've got a bunch of other junk in here which we'll turn off, but these are the only other two that I want you to worry about. Categories can get ranked in Google. They're kind of useful if you think about a category page. If you land on it from Google, is it really where you want to be? Probably not in most cases, but if it gets you traffic, it might be useful if it's competing against one of your other pages. They're not. Typically, in really important categories, I make my own pages which redirect to the category, so I kind of overtake the category from the default. The default lists all the blog posts. So the categories, if you don't know in WordPress, you can assign categories to blog posts and categorize your content into little boxes. So the main kind of topics that you talk about. So having those, yes, displayed is a 50-50 or less than 50-50 decision. Often I turn them off, especially on big websites. And if you turn them off, or in any case, you're not going to probably need the Yoast meta description. You can have a look whether you want to turn that off. This is a really personal one. If you don't have a lot of content and you're trying to get as much traffic as possible, maybe leave them on. Tags, you can also tag posts. I don't do that anymore. I think it's overkill. I typically turn this off. That really, tags can be in the hundreds, and it's just another version of categories. So I turn that off. Post formats, again, this is a thing that's irrelevant. You would disable that. Remove the categories prefix. That's because in WordPress you automatically have websitename.com/category/ the name of the category. And if you want to remove that and just have / the name of the category, you can click remove here. So that's another one you can play with. Then you've got archives, which is all of the posts against an author's name. Goes in an author archive, kind of like a category, but the author is the category. Again, you probably don't need those in search results, so you can disable that. Date archives, same thing. WordPress automatically creates months, years, folders for everything, depending on the date it was published for your posts. And again, you probably don't want them appearing in search, so you can disable them. Now, the reason we're disabling all of this stuff is because you want to give less stuff for Google to come and check. Because as your site grows, if it ever gets beyond 1,000 pages, Google has a limited amount of time they're going to spend, resources they're going to spend on your website. So by removing all of this stuff, you're not only removing junk from Google, you're also enabling your website to be checked by Google more regularly and more thoroughly. So you want to do this from the beginning so you don't have to worry about it later. Breadcrumbs, you probably don't need to worry about this if your theme doesn't have breadcrumbs and you want breadcrumbs, which is that thing normally on the top of the page where it says home / subsection / page name, which can make it kind of easy to navigate, especially in really big sites like e-commerce sites and stuff. Then breadcrumbs can be really handy. But if your theme doesn't do it, then you have to do it here and you have to set it up, grab the code. Yeah, I mean, your theme should do it, and if it doesn't do it, then I would debate the usefulness of it. But if you really think it's going to be useful, I sometimes add it to clients' websites if they have a lot of content, a lot of pages and a lot of products. Then if your theme doesn't do it, Yoast can help you out with it. And then you just add a tiny little snippet, which you can get from Yoast. They've got a link here on how to do it. It's not too difficult for a developer to do. Most of you probably won't be doing it. And RSS is just what appears to RSS readers. They're slowly dying. It's not a big deal anymore, but you can leave this as is. So they're the main settings. That's the main ones you want to do. The other thing that you have in the general section in Yoast is the ability to connect your website with Webmaster tools, which you definitely want to do for Google, Bing and Yandex, maybe. Bing probably, it gives some traffic. What it means is you're creating an actual connection with Google and feeding them information. I've got a video on that, which I'll link here if I don't forget. Slap me if I forget. Yeah, it's definitely something you want to do. It enables you to send more information to Google to tell you exactly where your pages and posts are. If you accidentally don't link one from somewhere, you create what's called an orphan because it has no home. And then Google doesn't kind of know it exists because it's just sitting there in limbo, floating around. So it's always great to have a sitemap, which Yoast creates by default, and to give that to Google. And so that's what my video explains to you. And you can do that for the other main search engines here. Not that these guys will give you a lot of traffic, so if you don't do it, it's not going to kill you. That's Webmaster Tools. So basically, once you're doing that process, they give you a code, you come and paste it in here, save it, go back to the tool, refresh it, etc. It's a pretty easy process, but there's a video to help you guys on that. The other one you can turn on and off here is some of the features. Generally, you won't want to touch most of this. The sitemaps are on. Used to be a separate section in Yoast, so now you can go in here and click that if you want to see your sitemap. It will take us to a separate page so you can see where your sitemap is. And if I bring the URL down. Hopefully you see this. It's basically your website / sitemap underscore, so underline index.xml, and you need to give that to Google when you're doing that other video I was talking about. So this takes all of the stuff that we've allowed in that stuff that we were turning on and off earlier that I was talking about. It appears in this sitemap. So when we turn that off and refresh this stuff and save it, the category, the tag, etc., and the author sitemap should disappear from here if you turn them off in Yoast. So that's important to check as well. These are just some of the things that appear in the Yoast console below the pages and post. If you don't think they're useful, you can turn them off. Admin bar, etc. Security, you can turn off security so that some authors can't do the SEO settings. If you've got people posting on your website and you're the only person actually publishing, you may want to take control of that or not, depending. You can turn that off here. Social is the next one on the left we're going to look at. This is pretty quick. You can put in all your social profiles here of your website, your business, yourself, depending if you're a personal brand or a business. Useful to do. Again, it appears in the knowledge graph and it gives Google a direct understanding of what social profiles you have. You don't have to do it, but doesn't hurt, right? Every little bit helps rank better in Google. More information is better. Facebook, not much to do here. You can upload a default URL for your Facebook posts. Open Graph data is automatically enabled. I have a separate video on this, but basically this creates some specific data that's passed to LinkedIn and Facebook to show your posts better. So you want to leave this on. Twitter, you've got Twitter cards. It's worth having them. You can choose to have them with an image, which I would do. If your blog posts always have a header image, I would do this and turn that on. Pinterest, this is the confirmation code for verifying your website on your Pinterest page. If you have a Pinterest page, do that. Gives you another kind of link. It's not a great link, but it's something, especially if your website's new. Link your website. Also gets you access to Pinterest Analytics for Business, which is free. You should do that on Pinterest. Definitely worth setting up. You can also do your Google page. If you have a Google business page, you can put that in here as well. So this is where all your links go, and this is how you link your site to Pinterest. Last one, I think, is tools. You shouldn't need to go into this kind of stuff. I wouldn't generally touch the file editor. You can bulk edit some of your meta descriptions and stuff in here if you found that there's duplicates or whatever, or a wonderful SEO person like me comes and gives you an audit which tells you all the things you're doing wrong, and you find that you've got to change a whole bunch of your meta descriptions and stuff. You can do that in here a lot faster. The other tools that you have access to include editing the robots text and the htaccess file. If you don't know what you're doing, don't touch this stuff. This can completely break your website and completely block Google. So be really careful. But the robots text is for blocking Google from crawling pages, which is what we were doing in the earlier section as well, but this is another way of doing it. And the htaccess file is where you can do redirects in code if you're really keen, and also set up a bunch of other rules, but typically you don't need to touch any of this stuff unless you're really, really daring. Are you daring? I don't know. Be careful. Let's have another look, see if I've missed anything in here. Features, that's pretty much it. So that's it for the Yoast 2018 tutorial. Just a quick checklist of what I personally would do to set up your website. I would just make sure I'm allowing and blocking the right sections. They're all allowed by default, but go in and block the garbage sections, the archives, the author archives, the date archives. Turn the media to their URLs if you want to do that. I think that's useful to do. Authorize your website with Google Webmaster Tools, which is now called Google Search Console. Check out my video on that. It'll also be linked down below to get your XML sitemap with Google. Potentially set up all your social media profiles, very handy, and link Pinterest if you're using Pinterest. And then basically all you need to do is whenever you create a page or post, you need to just make sure that you're doing your meta description, and the URL should be coming. The default URL for Google comes from the top, so the CTA test in this case, and here's that funny default one here. If we click just anywhere in the white section here, you get this default one from Yoast, which means it's basically going to copy this and then do dash or dot site name like that. That's what's going to appear in Google. So like that. But you don't need to do that. You don't need to change the heading unless you specifically want to change it or shorten it or adjust it for Google. Sometimes useful, especially if the headings are getting cut off, I would make them shorter. So once you see the search results and you notice they're getting cut off in Google, you can change it. The slug is the same as the URL on the top here. Again, I wouldn't change it. Just make sure it's short and meaningful. And your meta description can be up to approximately 300 characters. Try and keep it a bit shorter than that. Just make sure if we copy some of these sentences in here, I'm just going to show you what that looks like. 300 characters. Should all be bunched together like this. Yoast gives you an indication of whether it's getting long from this bar below the text. So if it's too short, it'll be orange. If it's too long, it'll be orange and red as well. I think, does it go red? Doesn't go red, just goes orange. That should be red. Why is that not red? And I've got another video on how not to use Yoast at the bottom here, because Yoast isn't always right. If you're using this problems and improvements section at the bottom, I've got a complete other video on that, so have a look for that one as well, how not to use Yoast in modern SEO, because as much as the whole plugin is very handy, this panel here, especially the problems and red and green and orange markers on the bottom, can be deceptive sometimes and give you the wrong idea. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. Give it a thumbs up. Give me the thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really helps. Be sure to subscribe if you have not already, because you're going to miss out on some other awesome videos on WordPress, SEO, how to get traffic, how to create an awesome website, how to get more customers, how to make cha-ching money, and how to just have an awesome website in general. So thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys, or you'll see me in the next video.